nothing new. But in today's interview with a gifted reader and teacher, Megan-Leigh, we're going to begin to unpack some of the insider wisdom that Megan has accumulated over the years about how cartomancy and divination can enhance more than just your ability to read the ways in which the energies of your past and your present and your future can affect your life and your magical practice. So stick around and remember this is your show too, so you can ask questions, share your thoughts, and become part of the show when we get started with season 5, episode 3 of the Brew Live podcast. We'll be back in just a second. And here we are, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Michael, to go ahead and introduce our guests and welcome everybody to the show.
So, hey, everybody. As always, I'm Michael Therese McQueen, and we have the lovely Megan-Leigh with us tonight. So, I'm just going to pass it off to Megan tonight. I want you to start off with us. Tell us about who you are, your practice, and anything else you wanted to get us started with.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Megan-Leigh Dickey, and I have been a tarot reader for about 26 years now. I don't know that I've ever actually formally done the math on that, but I started when in my late teens. We'll leave it there. And I read for over 20 years before I ever had any formal training, which is something I was talking about a little bit earlier. A lot of people ask me how I learned to do it. It's kind of a long story. We'll probably get into it as questions, unfold in this interview. But I'm also a teacher, so I read for private clients. I teach other people how to read tarot. I believe that it's something everyone can do. I think it involves being a little bit brave and being willing to say things out loud that your intuition tells you. That's, to me, when you make the jump from being an okay reader to a really amazing reader. So that's kind of my philosophy, and that's how I teach too. My teaching is more about empowerment and less about training, I guess. In my normal life, my day-to-day life, my 9-to-5 job, I'm actually a certified nurse midwife. So I provide women's health and deliver babies whenever I'm not reading and teaching tarot. So thanks for having me.
So glad for you to be here. We're so excited for our conversation tonight. So let's just jump right in. And one of the things that you said in your opening was that you believe that anybody can read tarot.
I do.
So let's dispel the myth about you need to be specifically gifted or you need to have this kind of this special psychic connection to be able to read tarot. And let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So I do think there are a lot of psychically gifted tarot readers out there. First of all, I believe that everyone is psychically gifted. And to me, the differentiation is, are you able to really use those gifts? Have you really tuned into and really honed those gifts? Or are they still kind of in the background? But everybody has them. It's like a browser tab that you have back there, maybe open and you're not using it all the time. So some tarot readers really tap into that psychic part of their brain in order to read. I'm actually one of those readers, and this is the analogy I use all the time. My analogy is that I am psychically gifted. I am able to use that gift. It's something that I've developed and practiced. However, it's like my psychic ability is a lake and I'm not a very good swimmer, and that makes tarot cards my boat is pretty much how it works. It's almost like they're a launch pad for me to get into something else or connect to something else in a way that I'm not able to really connect to it just on a surface level day to day. I think part of that is kind of defensive and protective as well, because if you stay 100% psychically engaged all the time, everywhere you go, you're going to drive yourself crazy. I mean, it's exhausting. It's not recommended. It's certainly not something I'm going to do. So it's almost like when I pull out my tarot cards, something flips, like a switch flips on in me that says, okay, this is what we're doing now. jump, 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 and now I'm connected to something bigger. You certainly don't have to read tarot that way, though. I mean, you can memorize tarot cards like flashcards if that's something that you want to do. They each have a meaning. I don't think your readings are going to have quite the level of depth. I don't also think you're going to have that pinpoint specific accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you read tarot cards like flashcards, you tend to read a little bit more like a newspaper horoscope. I say, like, your readings will say something like, you will wear clothes tomorrow.
Right.
For 99% of us, that's accurate. It's not that it's inaccurate, it's just not very specific. So the intuitive connection is where the specificity comes in.
So I have a question for you along those lines. You know, a lot I think of what we deal with as readers and as psychics and as practitioners. You know, probably at least half of what we do is dispelling myths and
Yeah.
dispelling flawed concepts that get passed down or were created in the 40s and 50s. So, from your perspective, one of the things I like to ask readers all the time is are the cards like a spiritual ally to you? Is there an overarching spiritual presence or connector behind your cards, or do you work with another spiritual ally who then is sort of the and then the cards are sort of the conduit for getting clearer about their picture? Or is there something else altogether?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So first of all, I have hundreds of decks, literally hundreds. I mean, like, I can't even I'm embarrassed to turn the camera around and show you the decks that are, all around me. And each deck does contain its own spirit, if you will. Each deck reads a little bit differently. I even have some decks that are multiple versions of the same deck. Like, I have one particular deck that I have the same deck in, I think, 5 different versions. The art is identical, but the character of the card is a little bit different. And so for that reason, I view my decks in an animistic way. Actually, my worldview is an animistic worldview. That's really my spirituality. I'm very much an animist. And so for that reason, each deck carries its own spirit. And what I'm connecting with is either, I guess I would refer to it as like a collective conscious or the particular energy of the client. If I'm reading for a client, what I'm connecting with is them. Is it my guides talking to their guides? I don't really know. I'm not exactly sure what's on the other side of that veil, but I do know that I use different decks to read for different things. Like, sometimes if I'm doing a love reading, I have a particular deck that seems to read those really well. If I have someone that needs like a no bullshit, like, you really need to be told about yourself, like, you're actually the problem here, I have a deck that's very straightforward and very blunt. And then I have some decks that are more doom and gloom and more, we can put a positive spin on everything. So each deck has its own spirit. And I think that assists in what I'm doing, because I will select decks either based on how I'm feeling that day, on how the client's energy is whenever they come to me, or maybe the subject matter of what I'm reading on. So that's a complex question.
I really loved that, especially since I also am a part of the Deckaholics Anonymous group, of like just hoarding tarot decks as a reader myself. And I absolutely agree with you to that point that each deck gives something different. And even in just kind of my walk as a reader, and I just want to ask if this is something that's true for you, that having those different nuances of each deck has also made me a better reader. Because even if I'm reading with one particular deck, sometimes I'll get kind of the psychic image from another deck that will give me like an extra nuance for the client and connecting to that energy. So I'm just wondering if that's something that you experience also.
That is definitely something that I experience for sure. I do think having multiple decks and connecting with multiple decks in almost like a ritualistic fashion has made me a better reader, because every artist has a little bit of a different take on, this one particular card. Maybe this one artist really connects with the elemental aspect of this card. Maybe another artist really connects with, the people in the card, or maybe the background of this card is what really spoke to me as opposed to what's actually going on within the subject. But yeah, I will very often be reading with one deck and thinking about another, or get hints or images from another deck, almost combining decks. And occasionally I will shuffle decks together and combine decks. I have been known to do foolishness such as that from time to time.
I love that.
Well, I've got a question for you as well. And as I ask the question, I just want to encourage those who are watching. I also want to apologize to those who are watching who might have gotten confused about what time we were going live. You were not the issue. I was. We were just saying how AI is going to change my life, and I'm going to be able to get time zones and everything correct. Somehow I screwed up and said this was going live at 9 o'clock. So I apologize for that. But the question that I have, and then I want to encourage those watching to ask their questions in the chat. The best way to do that is to be on the YouTube version of this, which means you could go to the brewlive.com, click on and open up the video that's tonight's episode in a separate window, and then you can just ask your questions in the sidebar. But my question for you, Megan, is when somebody comes to you for a reading, or somebody talks to you about being a reader, and what it means for you, what's the most frustrating misconception that people have?
Okay. Let's see which one I'm going to pick as the most frustrating, because I have a handful. I think the most frustrating thing that I hear is, and I wrote a blog article about this on my website. There is a blog article, and it is entitled, "I've always wanted a tarot reading, but I'm just so scared." First of all, the fuck are you scared of? Like, what do you think I'm going to do to you? I'm not sure what it is you think I'm going to do. And then I say, "What are you scared of?" And they say, "I'm scared you're going to tell me that I'm going to die." Well, bitch, you are. We're all going to die. Like, you don't need a set of cards to tell you that. I mean, yes, there is a death card. No, it doesn't mean what you think it means. Yes, there is a devil card. No, it also doesn't mean what you think it means. And I think that's the most frustrating thing, is like the media portrayal. Not that there's a lot of media portrayal, but anytime there is media portrayal of tarot cards, it's always like the weirdest ass person sitting in a weird ass room talking in weird ass riddles, and like, "Oh, this is and it'll be a card that literally doesn't exist. Like, this is
You're in danger.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes. This is the Master of Orbs card, and it means you're going to get hit by a bus tomorrow." And I'm like, what? And so that's the myth I'm always trying to dispel. A, I'm not going to tell you you're going to die, because we already know that information. So that would not be valuable or useful. And then B, people that come to me and want to know something really specific, like, when am I going to meet my soulmate? That is not useful information. The information that you want is, how can I align myself energetically in the path of my soulmate? That's the information you want. And if we could just learn how to ask appropriate questions, like as readers, if we could help our clients reframe their questions into appropriate questions, our readings would be fucking amazing. I mean, they would be amazing. But you have a lot of people that say, "When am I going to meet my soulmate?" And they go, 6 months. What? No, stop it. Stop.
Talk more about that. Tell us more about asking the difference that asking the right question and seeking the right outcome can have compared to asking the movie questions.
I think this is the thing that I encounter once I've had a client and I've read for them once. It's like they kind of learn my style and how I read. The first time they come to me, they will say something like, "When am I going to meet my soulmate?" I'm just going to put that, I'm going to keep that question, because that's a very common question that I get. And there are many problems with that question. First of all, tarot is not a sideshow fortune telling device. That is not what it's meant to be. It should not be used that way for $5 one card yes or no readings. in my opinion. Now that's a hot button because there are a lot of people that read that way and that's their bread and butter, and that's great. But in my opinion, that's a misuse of an incredibly powerful tool. A reading with a tarot reader should feel more like sitting down with a good therapist for half an hour or an hour, because you should get up with an action plan. And this is how I teach. Like if you take my tarot classes and you walk away with nothing else, it should be how to ask the right question. And the right question includes why, how, what can I do differently? What behavior patterns have led up to this? So it's never like, when am I going to meet my soulmate? It's, why haven't I met my soulmate yet? Tarot can tell you a lot of things. It can reveal, maybe you haven't been ready yet, because these are the things in your life that you need to address. Because even if you met your soulmate tomorrow, you're going to fuck up that relationship because you're not ready for it. And so tarot is going to get to that. So tarot always wants you to go one layer deeper and one layer deeper and one layer deeper. And that's how your questions should be designed. They should be designed to get to the actual root of the question, not just the surface level of the question. And those are the best readings. I mean, but those also are the readings that tend to piss people off the most. Like if you're going to get a bad review or get somebody argue with you, it's going to be when you tell them about themselves. Like, when's he going to call me? The last 5 guys I've dated are shitbags. When am I going to meet the one? Well, all 5 of them might have been the one. Like the problem actually could be you. Let's look at it. Like,
Right.
are you ignoring red flags? Are you not in a healthy place where you can connect healthy? Like, let's look at we don't want to look at when am I going to meet the one. We want to look at why haven't I met the one yet? And what do I need to be focusing on in order to get to the one? So there's a reading that I do a lot that I do. Focus on this, let go of this, the outcome will be this. And I'll just throw a couple of cards out for each pile and say, we need to focus on this right now. We need to let go of this right now. And when we do that successfully, the outcome will be this. And that's usually an incredibly helpful and very revealing reading. And if that can relate to any question.
I really love that. And I think it comes back to that Hollywood portrayal of tarot, of that tarot is just supposed to give you all the answers.
Right.
When I have clients, I like to tell them that this is a discernment tool. Like, this is a discernment tool to give you the tools to make better informed decisions going forward. Because like once you leave that table, the energy shifts. Like,
That's right.
the energy changes the minute that you leave this reading, and it's up to you what you do with this information after that. Because I've had people come back to me and be like, well, X, Y, and Z didn't change, and my question to them is, well, did you follow any of the advice that was given during this reading? And the answer is always a no.
Right.
And I have an example. I have a few clients who come and they're stuck on this one relationship. Like, this one relationship with this one person, and like and you can tell them until you're blue in the face, this is not what you need to be working on. And the cards just keep repeating themselves. And they're like, well, I don't understand. And I was like, and just sometimes you want to go through and just strangle them through the phone and be like, bitch, this is not for you. Shut the fuck up and do something else.
Right. Yes. Yes, that happens to me all the time. It's almost always relationships. Occasionally, like, why haven't I found a job? Why haven't I found a job? Why haven't I found a job? There's no, I'm doing this and there's no jobs available. I'm like, are you sitting around every single day saying there's no jobs available? There's no jobs available. There's no jobs available. Because if you are, you're actually manifesting that. So let's look at what you can be focusing on right now, what you can be letting go of right now. And I had this one person one time that I read for, and there's no jobs. And I'm like, you need to cast a wider net. The area where you're at isn't going to be it. You need to look at relocation and really consider that, because that's where the good stuff is. And she wasn't going to do it. She was not going to do it. And she came back and got the same reading over and over and over and over and over. And I'm like, I don't know how many ways you want me to say it. Like, you are paying me to literally tell you the same thing.
Right. So my question with you, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to remind our viewers that if you have a question, we've got it up on the screen. What would you like to ask of Megan? Go ahead and type that in the comments, and we'll get it up on the screen for you. Go ahead, Michael. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. It's just so my question to you is like, how do you deal with a client like that? Because I have a moral issue about that. Like, because because
Uh-huh.
I don't want to keep taking your money. Like, if you're
Right.
not going to do anything like to change the situation or branch out, because one of these people who's a client of mine just wouldn't branch out of this network of people,
Hmm.
and I kept telling them you have to branch out. Well, I don't want to. Well, I can't do anything for you. Like,
Then what do you want?
what do you want? and and it's just like how I wonder for those who are readers who are watching, how do you kind of break from that, just as an ethical question, of people who just keep coming and coming and asking the same questions, how do we kind of put the stop on that?
I'm really honest about it, actually. Whenever I have someone who comes to me and I kind of see we're at I guess like a dead end energetically, I will say, here's the deal. I have really taken this question as far as I can take it. I am happy to continue taking your money if you want me to continue telling you the same thing. If that's some sort of addiction that you have and you need me to be that person for you, then, who am I to deprive you of that? Okay. But what I usually say, my recommendation is to give this several months, at least 3 months or
Mhm.
so, to kind of let this energy evolve a little bit so that I'll have something new to connect with and look at. So I don't really want to hear from you on this same issue before about 3 months. And
Mhm.
then, about 3 months from now, if you want to check in again and see how we're looking, and maybe if there's something different for me to be able to say, that would be a good time. I'm just really honest about it.
So another question that I have along those lines is, I'm sure there are some folks who are tuning in. Actually, I think we might have just gotten we've actually got a comment that I'm going to put up on the screen in a second. But what for those who are listening in and say, this sounds like the kind of reader that I've been looking for, or the kind of teacher that I've been looking for to teach me about using my cards as part of my magical practice. The question, and we'll put a pin in your answer until I read what Carolyn has to share. But the question is, what would you tell the person is the best way to start their journey of using cards as part of their esoteric or magical or spiritual practice? So put a pin in that question for a second. And then Carolyn says, not a question, but I can attest that Megan has definitely read for me several times, and so much truth. Sometimes it's a hard truth, but truth. And it took me years to listen. So I mean, there's a teaching right there, that we don't always get our answers the first time
Yeah.
around, because we may not always be ready to hear what the
Oh, you
answer is.
get your answers. You just
Yeah,
don't necessarily want to receive your answers. You may
or
not
hear them.
receive your answers, but you get your answers.
But so, what
You
would
get
you
them.
tell the person who's asking themselves, you know, how will this enhance or add to or modify in whatever way my magical practice?
I think a really good place to start. I actually I talk about this on my blog too, about how I started and how to start to build that connection. And I think the best way to do it is finding a personal bridge between yourself and every single card in the deck. Um, and the simplest way to do that, in my opinion, is to look for a deck that you connect with. And let me stop right there and say, you do not have to be gifted your first tarot deck. I don't know where that came from or why people still say that, but just stop the madness. Find a deck that you connect with art that for whatever reason you like. It speaks to you. It's, I don't care whatever reason. I mean, I got 500 of them, of course. I mean, just pick a deck. And then you need to start looking at that deck, essentially one card at a time. My first assignment in every class that I teach is go through that deck one card at a time and find what about that card you can connect to a personal experience in your
Mhm.
own life. Is it the people? Is it the clothes? Is it the activity they're doing? Is it the background? Is it the colors? Does it remind you of a song? Does it remind you of something your dad said to you when you were 4? Does it remind you of a car? Does it remind you of something that happened in school? Does it seem positive? Does it seem negative? Feel what each card feels like when you really try to immerse yourself in that card. Because what you're doing when you do that is you are establishing an energy signature for a particular experience. So I have a particular card in almost every deck, not every deck, that will remind me of the relationship with my father. So for me, that is the energy signature of that relationship. Now, my relationship with my father is going to feel very different than your relationship with your father, or your relationship with your father, or maybe you never met your father, or whatever. So the personal connection is how you start to make it personal to you. And that's how you start to incorporate tarot into your life, is to feel what each card feels like and to feel how that's personal to you. And then when that card comes up in a reading, you're going to feel the energy of that particular scenario that you connected that card with. And that's how you're going to start to tell the story and build the bridge between you and the client. That's, in my opinion, the most powerful way to start. And that's how I started.
I'm like in awe of that, because that's very profound. Like, especially like to me it's very profound. And so but I love that, and I sense so much of the truth of that, and even just in the way that I read and the way that I relate, becoming from a folk Catholic standpoint. It's like, it's very much like, we tell the story of the saint, but it's like that mythos is supposed to connect to your own life.
Right.
And I think that there's this kind of myth that, like, in spirituality everything should be mysterious, and everything should be kind of, there's almost like this disconnect, like, that there's something that's supposed to come outside of you, but the cards are really just there to tell the story of you. And it's like,
Right.
the best therapists and the people who tell the best stories make the connection to their own personal life. So I just find
Right.
that energy signature very profound.
Because that's the real magic. That's the real magic, because it's not supposed to be disconnected or mysterious. And tarot cards are the bridge between your daily stuff as a human being and the, esoteric, spiritual, animistic side of life. They're a bridge. And the real magic is about uncovering, I guess, the sacred and profound within the mundane connection. I mean, because they're cards, right? They're literally cards on pieces of paper.
Right.
They hold no magic in and of themselves, but it's your
Mhm.
discovery of that connection. And you learn that when you go through the deck over and over and over and over and over again, and really allow yourself to get lost in every card, that every single human experience you can possibly imagine carries its own energy signature, I guess, for lack of better phrasing, and all of them are somewhere in that deck. It may be hidden in the background of another card, you know what I mean? Like, like I said, there are layers, but every single human experience can be found somewhere in that deck if you can just work to find it and find what your connection with that deck is.
Yes.
Like, for example, I don't like to read for myself very much. I don't think I'm really very good at it because I'm too subjective, I'm too biased. I like to have other people read for me. And when I have other people read for me, 99% of the time I will say, don't show me my cards, because you're reading for me based on your interpretation of those cards. And if I am looking at your cards, I am now interpreting those cards through my lens. And if I could do that really well, I wouldn't have asked you to read for me.
True.
So don't show me my cards.
Yes.
So I tend to, and if I'm reading for another reader, I will say, do you want me to show you the cards, or do you just want me to read? Because you're coming to me for my interpretation of the cards. That's how
That is
personal it is.
absolutely worth the price of admission right there. That's my mind-boggling moment. I have a similar, a related kind of question to that. Do you? Somebody asked a question before we went live, and they're still trying to get in. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the question for you, Carrie. That you're trying to. I think what you're trying to ask, and that is, do you ever use the cards in a way that that differs from just doing a reading? Like, do you use it as a sort of a sigil or a bookmark of an energy connection that you have? Since it sounds like you you approach them animistically like I do. The question for you is, do you use them in your magical practice in ways other than divination?
So for that, I tend to not use tarot as much for that as I use playing cards and oracle cards for that purpose. I love playing cards. I mean, plain old like bicycle playing cards. I have, once again, not going to turn the camera around and show you, because I have a lot of playing cards with a lot of like sigils written on them, and they're folded up and stuffed into jars, and they're sitting here and they're sitting there. So I use a lot of cartomancy in my magical practice, but it's almost always playing cards. For whatever reason, I don't use tarot as often. I think it's because I don't like to separate out like tarot decks. Like if I have an intact deck, it's difficult for me to be able to pull a card out of that deck and like put it somewhere else so that it can do whatever energy it's doing, and then have this non-intact deck. Like stuff like that keeps me up at night. I have no problem doing it with playing cards. Like I will go to the dollar store and buy 10 decks of dollar playing cards, and I'll mark, like if it's intact, I'll mark like an X or something on the box to know like this has now been dedicated as a spell deck. So, until all of these cards are used, I can do whatever for this or that or the other, esoteric thing that I'm doing. And then this one is for reading. And I tend not to cross over decks that I'm reading with versus doing magical work with. That's just an idiosyncrasy of my practice. I don't have a good reason for that.
Do you think any of it has to do with where you grew up and the sort of the intersectionality and proximity to hoodoo as a practice?
I think possibly that has to do with it because playing cards are a big hoodoo thing. And I grew up in South Louisiana, just outside the New Orleans area. And the idea of reading or performing divination with playing cards is something that I guess has always been really comfortable for me. Like I've never, that was never like a foreign thing for me. That seems like a really normal thing to do. And I do think that playing cards as spell work rather than tarot cards as spell work probably is directly related to my comfort with hoodoo practice in general, probably based on I mean, if I grew up like in Michigan, I don't know if I would feel that way. It's hard to say.
So I have a question for you, Megan. So I'm just wondering, do other divinatory forms inform your tarot practice? Because I know for me, because I go into stints where I play around with Lenormand, and Lenormand has definitely influenced the way that I read tarot. Because I read all my cards in pairs now, because that's a Lenormand thing. So I'm just wondering, is that something that has influenced your tarot practice also?
So I love Lenormand too, and I'm skilled in Lenormand. I'm also skilled in runes, like Norse runes. I have several sets of runes that I've made for myself, and then a couple that I've bought. And I think sometimes there's some crossover, but for me, tarot was the first form of divination I learned. And so for me, it's the other way around. I think my tarot practice informs the way I read other things. But you have to be careful of that in Lenormand, right? Because Lenormand is different than tarot in the way you connect. Tarot,
Yes.
that intuitive connection where you're building your own bridge is really important. Lenormand is very much about memorization, those specific set of meanings in a specific order. It's much more structured, it's much more rigid, and so it's different than tarot for me. But yeah, like I find myself, like, say if I'm reading runes, I tend to try to connect a rune, like this reminds me of this particular tarot card, and not the other way around. Like tarot is my foundation, that I tend to approach everything through that lens. Even scrying, like if I'm doing scrying through a stone or a crystal ball or something like that, it tends to be in tarot related images. It's like that's how I relate to whatever I don't know what I'm relating to, whatever it is I'm relating to, whatever kind of crap that I'm looking at. I tend to look at it through tarot.
Nice.
So it's the opposite for me.
That's really interesting. I wonder if you wouldn't mind, if you're comfortable with it, sharing a little bit about what does your esoteric or spiritual practice or metaphysical practice look like beyond tarot, because it sounds like your tarot and divination and cartomancy practices inform a lot of your magic.
Mhm.
And so what does that expression as it fleshes out look like for you?
Um, that's an interesting question because I don't know really how connected they are. They're probably more connected than I realize they are, but like my magical practice is essentially like my daily, like my normal daily stuff. I grew up, my father is 100% Sicilian. And so I was raised Catholic, but leaning really hard into like Benedicaria Catholicism. So there's a lot of superstition and a lot of throwing the salt over the shoulder and a lot of stirring this counterclockwise. And, that type of stuff was just part of my normal daily life. So my magical practice isn't even something that I consider separate from my normal day-to-day life. So I don't even really know how to answer that question. I use a lot. I have a wall of herbs just behind the camera here. So I use a lot of herbal energies. I love jars. So I have spell jars. I have more than one altar for different purposes that I do things like, ritualistically change the water out and light candles at certain times. Whenever I cook, if I like you, I'm always stirring it clockwise. If I don't like you, I might be stirring it counterclockwise. Didn't say that out loud. Stuff like that. Like that's just if I'm stirring your coffee counterclockwise while I'm putting your cream in it, I'm probably fucking pissed at you. You might not want to drink it.
So I'm watching you while you're cooking when I come to your house, Megan, just so you know.
You should always watch. Am I putting cinnamon in it or am I putting fennel in it? Like what's going in that and which direction are you stirring it? Yeah.
Now you
Yeah,
teach a course at the Inner Alchemy Mystery School where we're
I do.
privileged to have you. Tell us a little bit about not just that course, but the other services and classes that you teach outside of the school as well.
Oh, so I teach tarot outside of the school as well, outside of the Inner Alchemy School. Whenever I teach it outside, it's a little more accelerated and a little more broken down into like beginning, advanced, private apprenticeship. My beginning tarot class is about 6 weeks long, usually with a class once a week. And I will take you from I have never touched a tarot deck before to I can make my own spreads and read with a reasonable degree of accuracy within that 6 week period. And then for people that want to take it further, deeper, build a stronger connection, I do offer an advanced level that you can do after that tends to be more like Michael, what you were saying, like card combos and other, I guess, more formal ways of looking at relationships between cards. And what do I mean whenever I say this card is the air of fire or, those things? I don't really go into that in my beginning level class because it's a lot of information to take in. And then I also do private apprenticeships as well, where I have students that will, maybe they're opening their own business. They want to start reading for clients and they feel like they just want a mentor to bounce things off of. I feel like I almost kind of take all of my students on as private apprentices in some way because I maintain contact with them. I mean, for years, I have students that I taught years ago that I'm still talking to that will email me, hey, I have this reading. This is how I'm looking at it. Are you seeing anything that I'm not seeing? How would you interpret this or whatever like that. And that, of course, I offer private readings as well. I do my fair share of private readings. Most of them are Zoom. I do email readings as well. I don't tend to like those as much, but usually it's either Zoom or email. Yeah, most of the time.
I give you props. I tried to do email readings and I was just like, I just can't connect. It's just like, it's too horoscope for me. I was just like, I need to see you or hear your voice.
It's true. It is kind of horoscopish, but if you can just quiet yourself and trust yourself when you look at those cards and just start telling the story. Like when I do email, I don't type it out. I do a voice recording. And I think that has made the difference. When I'm typing it out, it's very horoscopish and it feels very disconnected. So my email readings are, here's a picture of your card, and this is a voice recording, because it's like I have to actively channel that information, and I don't edit any of those voice recordings. I don't ever like start over again. If I say, oh, wait, never mind, now I see what this was in the beginning, like you have all of that on your recording because it's actually live of me connecting with what I'm connecting with and the story unfolding as I'm telling it. And I think there's something really valuable in that. You know, if you edit it and try to make it perfect and here is your perfect story, which is what you do when you write it, right? You're not going to send someone just a stream of consciousness. So try it for email readings, try doing a voice recording instead of typing it out, and you may feel very, very differently.
Nice. I'll definitely take that on because that's so true. And I like how you said, you know, like, because it's like sometimes even later on in the reading, like you pick up on something different and how things connect. And like, you know, it didn't make sense in the beginning. You're like, oh shit, like, you know, this is it right here. Like, you know, yes.
Right. And when you're typing it out, you lose that. There's the thread that runs through everything gets disconnected when you're typing. And so I do not like chat style or text style readings. Now, I have a friend who's also a very gifted reader, and that's her best reading is typing. She's a writer, and for some reason, she just really, really connects well that way, and that works for her. And she kind of types out that sort of stream of consciousness, and it works for her. It just doesn't work for me.
Right.
It's almost like automatic writing for her. Then.
It is. Yes,
So
it is like
the
automatic
layering of
writing
those
for her.
gifts. Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas I'm more like automatic verbal diarrhea. So.
In good company.
Yeah.
So we're at the 45-minute mark. If there were three things that you could share with the person who is looking to incorporate tarot or Scopa or Lenormand or any kind of cartomancy and divination work into their practice, what would the three biggest things you would want them to have as a takeaway from initially connecting? And then while you're talking about that, I'm going to put Megan's contact information on the screen so you can either bookmark it or pause and jot this down, because we really encourage folks to do that. But Megan, what would you say?
Okay, I think number one would be trust yourself. Trust yourself, trust your intuition. If a card is really screaming something at you, trust it. Number two would be throw the book away so that you can develop your own connection, because that book is not going to do anything for you. It's going to be a crutch that honestly is going to block your intuition, in my opinion. So trust yourself, throw the book away so that you can trust yourself, and get a deck that you feel connected to would be number three. If you buy a deck and you're flipping through it and it just seems like, I don't know, I thought this deck was great and I'm not feeling it, put it away, because that has happened to me. Put it away. It may speak to you later. It may not, it doesn't matter, but find a deck that you really feel like you can connect to. And it doesn't matter if someone else thinks that's like a, a poo-poo deck or whatever. Find the one that you connect with.
Michael, I'm going to leave the last questions up to you.
So I have a really basic question, and I want to know, because I have my favorite card. So what is your favorite card, and what archetype is your favorite from which deck? If you just what comes to mind.
Okay, my favorite card. Let's talk about the Queen of Pentacles for a second, or the Queen of Coins. I used to think she was so boring and so just like blah blah, and whatever. She's just the one who's like, not doing anything with her life. But the older I get, which I think is my problem, is that I'm getting older, I so identify with that grounded, stable, settled, like I don't always have to be seeking in a dysfunctional way. And the Queen of Coins, or the Queen of Pentacles, or the Queen of Discs, or the Queen of Earth, or however you want to refer to her as, is definitely up there on my list of energies that I feel really, really, really connected with in a profound way. Also, if I can add a second one in, the Queen of Swords, who speaks her mind, who has clear boundaries. I always say swords are the suit that cuts through the bullshit. So if you want something done, and just to get straight to the point, the Queen of Swords is your girl. And I think I can identify with both of those energies. Usually if I'm going to choose a significator, which is really not something I do very often, but if I were forced to choose a significator, for me, I would be the Queen of Swords. If I were to be forced to choose a significator that I would look up to and aspire to be, it would be the Queen of Pentacles.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to say, and I just want to confirm that for you for the significator, I have a deck that the Queen of Swords is Joan of Arc, and I see that very much as your energy, and it's just like, it's the perfect connection right there. And so
I've got some decks with some really stellar Queen of Swords drawings.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to second that and say that as soon as you said Queen of Swords would be your significator, that's really kind of how I see you too. And so, with having said that, I want to thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us on this superb owl Sunday. Although I've not seen any superb owls, but I do understand that that Michael's and my team, the birds, are gonna kick some ass as the opener for the Rihanna concert that's going on tonight. And so we want to thank those who are watching too, because we know you had other places you could be that would be so much less interesting than this. So we're thrilled you're here. I apologize again for fucking up the time. You know, it is what it is. You can't really trust me with technology that much. But Megan, thank you so much, and Michael, thank you for being an amazing co-host. This was like a special treat for me to get to hear from a couple of my my favorite readers and get your insights and the takeaways. And it's one of those episodes that I'm sure I'm going to go back and rewatch while we're doing the post production stuff. Jan Sylvester said, "Thank y'all for a great podcast." Thank you for tuning in, Jan and Caroline and all those folks who watched. And if you're watching on the replay, be sure to drop a comment below the video. And if you have any questions for Megan or for Michael or for me, you can ask those questions there as well, because this is just the start of the conversation. The rest of the conversation will be what follows. And so thank you, Megan. Thank you, Michael. We're going to wrap the show up, and we'll see y'all in 2 weeks on the 26th of February, when Reverend Dominic will be talking with us about African diasporic traditions in our esoteric practice, and I'm sure lots of other stuff, lots more irreverence, lots more laughter, lots more good information for y'all. So have a great one. We'll talk to everybody soon.